excluded naturally, on purpose, but I can see how Roa felt that. I would have been really annoyed by that as well.
Yeah.
I didn't think that was a great way of Margaret.
No. So in considering that thing, and I've got that. But would you not subscribe to the view that actually, if things are in a fast-moving environment, to funnel everything through a single point, i.e. the grade 6, to get to the people that need to do the work, or sometimes you'll end up doing work directly with the DD? Or have I got that wrong?
I mean, I guess it depends which way you cut it. So, it could be that, Ro's really busy with this. I won't even bother wasting half an hour, just go direct to the grade 7. That's one thing. Whereas, Roa was very busy. She was doing the whole shebang.
Yes.
But again, I think, relationships had just broken down. But it did happen quite consistently. It wasn't a one-off thing. But I do think Margaret did say, if I need something now, I will just ask them. I'm a deputy director. I'm allowed to ask them. I don't need to go through you.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a fairly accurate summary of the discussion. But I do completely sympathise with Roa feeling that, that undermined her authority.
Yeah, but do you think that was done deliberately to undermine Roa, or it was done because that's the way they wanted to work and it was a necessity from their point of view?
I think it was done because it was a necessity. I don't think it was, I think everybody knows that, there's a nice way of commissioning and working across, a team. And that's just sometimes how it just wasn't, it didn't land that way sometimes.
Okay. Have you?
I would also, just on that, sorry.
Yes,
if you've got your deputy directors just randomly calling you, and I know that happened quite a lot, particularly on Fridays for some reason, it's also a bit scary. Well, it's not scary, but it's like, okay, like I've got to do this now. So, I don't think for us as well, it was a great way of operating.
Okay, I understand that. Yeah. Did you or any of your peers, as far as you're aware, and you can only speak for yourself, I guess, ever say to Roa that she was doing a better job than Margaret or Sonia?
I don't think, to be honest, I don't know if I wouldn't be able to say if I did or if I didn't.
Okay.
It doesn't sound like it, but again, things can be taken completely out of context. So, that
surely. That's it.
No,
I understand that. So I think there's one thing to say to a person you're doing a good job, and there's another to say you're doing a better job than your line managers.
Yeah, or it could have been, I don't know.
That's okay.
If anything was that, it would not have been, you are more suitable for this role than Margaret or Sonia.
Right.
Which is what I think you're trying to say by using that example.
I'm not trying to say it. I'm just reflecting what somebody else has said.
Yeah. So I think any of that, if it was said, would have been in a context of trying to kind of boost her up a little bit, but then also very specifically. But, if I was to say, yeah, you're better than Sonia, like, absolutely not.
Okay.
So I don't know, and I can't remember.
Okay, that's no problem. I'll come back to that in a second because I've got a specific question about that. But have you ever told Roa that she's the best manager you've ever worked for?
No, I did not think that. No.
Did Roa? Oh, I've asked you that question about complaining about her interview with Michael. Did you witness any behaviours directed towards Roa that were not appropriate, bullying or discriminatory based on race or sex, particularly from Margaret or Sonia? That's a no, is it?
No. I don't think she was very well managed, but that's different to
In what
having.
way don't you think she was managed?
She was obviously very difficult to manage, right? But good managers can meet that and stop things like this from happening. So the fact that we're here, is indicative that there are lots of failures to address both her performance and her behaviours in a way that reached a satisfactory outcome for people. But
Okay.
within that, and they were trying to give her honest feedback about because you do need feedback to improve, don't you? She's ambitious, she wants to
Yeah,
go there.
absolutely.
And she didn't like to hear it. So
So
but have I seen anything? Certainly nothing on sex, because they're both females. I can't imagine that happening. Race, we've got quite it's not an all white team, that's for sure either. It's still fairly, it's not that diverse, but it's not.
yeah. So can I come back to a couple of things,
Yeah.
if I may? You said that she was a challenge to manage. In what sort of sense?
Her way of working is very unique, I think. And I think she tried to put lots of artificial structures around things. So, like updates, really, circulate lots of readouts. So I think she was naturally trying to kind of put structure within a team that just naturally wouldn't work within a task force. She had views, and I think she was quite inflexible in, if she thought something should happen one way and if it happened a different way, then the next week would be taken up by her trying to convince people that she was right all along, rather than just going with it. And then
So come back to what you said earlier about she'd spend more time than complaining about things.
yeah. And so I can imagine that every conversation you'd have with Roa, she'd just be moaning about a few things, and then you wouldn't actually get to what you want her to do or talk to her about, and that those conversations would just be very unpleasant to have.
Yeah. I'll come back to that in a minute, because you made a very good point about, well, surely there was some feedback. Did you know there was some feedback given to her?
Yes, yeah.
I'll come back to that in a second, if I may. Did you ever witness any in any team meetings, Roa being cut across by Margaret or Sonia, or being interrupted unnecessarily, or behaviour that would make you think, well, that's not ideal?
Not very corporate. She might have been, again, I can't think of any examples, but she might have been, interrupted to stop her saying something that they thought was unhelpful.
Uh-huh.
Or if she was, saying something that was just wrong or in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So it would have been to prevent her talking anymore, rather than, or she might have said something that just wasn't relevant or something like that.
Okay. In relation to meetings with Michael present, Roa says there were some occasions when Michael offered thanks for work done, and he's said something like, "Oh well, my thanks to, for instance, Margaret, Sonia, and others." Did you notice that? And what would your view about that be if someone said, "Well, my thanks to Margaret and her team, or Margaret and others that have worked on this"?
I'd have to know specifics, to be honest with you. If he was a director and the team wasn't that big, so I think the thing about the team is that it wasn't very big, but obviously what you were dealing with was huge. So I think there's a disparity in terms of responsibility and the amount of people, which makes it a bit, like he's only, one director only has 20 people, but the reality was it wasn't really like that. So yes, you would expect a director to know who did what and say thank you directly. But he might have just been in a rush and said thank you, but not, thought to do it appropriately.
Yeah. So, but you never witnessed any of that?
I might have, but I can't remember thinking.
That's okay.
gosh, you know, that was bad.